Our next speaker is taking on something that Andreas referred to, that battle between platform and publisher. Who owns the space? Who should own that space? And how do we thrive in a world where that fight is going on? It's the independent editor-in-chief at Shandwick and director of the Scott Trust USA, Vivian Schiller.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I was fascinated by Andreas's presentation, and I'm actually going to pick up just where he left off, because in addition to all of the, listening to the evolution of the publishing industry and how publishers are, have found their feet in the new reality, there is, of course, a whole other aspect to that, and that is the platforms who are taking up so much of both the mind share and the advertising revenue from many publishers. So we're going to dissect that. I think, interestingly enough, I could sort of throw this whole presentation away. We could spend the next 25 minutes just talking about the events of the last few days in terms of the reporting about Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. I'll touch on that a little bit, but that's not really what this presentation about on the one hand. On the other hand, it's sort of at the essence of what this presentation is about. So you may be familiar with this expression, move fast and break things. This is from Mark Zuckerberg. And it was his motto for Facebook, and it was posted all over all of the Facebook offices, starting from about 2010 for many years. It was the ethos of the company, which is, we are all about growth. We're all about just getting more and more users, and that the greatest good was more people, more openness, more connection, and if you break a few things along the way, well, so be it. Well, we now know that, in fact, they did move very fast, and there were a few things that were broken. And the list is long, but for today we're going to focus on what was broken between the platforms and the publishers, and how publishers can regain a little bit of what they might have lost in giving over some audience and attention to the platforms. So, BuzzFeed, in some ways, is kind of the poster child for the sort of the whiplash that's happened in the industry. If you see 2015, that's Jonah Peretti, the founder of BuzzFeed, the headline of this article, "Who needs a website when you have Facebook? For us, increasingly doesn't matter where your content lives. That can actually be a huge advantage." And they put out this graphic, which was widely shared, that showed how the circle in the middle is BuzzFeed as a publisher, not BuzzFeed's owned and operated platforms. In fact, their owned and operated platform, the website, is way up there on the right. And the point then from Jonah Peretti was, we just want you, we know that it's a distributed world, and we want you to have a great BuzzFeed experience no matter where you are. No need to come back to our website. It doesn't matter. Just experience us on Facebook, on Twitter, on whatever app, on whoever your aggregator is, and that's just fine with us. And at the time, particularly for many legacy publishers who were really struggling, this felt a little bit like prophecy. And we saw BuzzFeed very much being a leader, the new kid on the block, the digital natives, doing very, very well. And a lot of people followed that lead and said, you know what, we want our scale to be across whatever platform, not necessarily scale on our own platforms. And yet, 2018, quite a different story. This is Jonah Peretti just a few weeks ago. The media is in crisis. Google and Facebook taking the vast majority of ad revenue and paying content creators far too little for the value they deliver to users. And then this post, ironically, on Facebook, Facebook is taking the news out of your news feed, but we've got you covered. Download our app. This is the opposite message of what he was preaching just a few weeks ago, which is, doesn't matter, experience us wherever you want. Now it is, come to us. So how did we get there? I kind of like to look at the changes in the last few years through this triptych of Wired covers about featuring Mark Zuckerberg. From Darling to here we are on the right, a slightly worse for wear Mark Zuckerberg facing a lot of scrutiny and a lot of criticism from all corners. It's been quite a year in particular. Here we are just a little bit after Election Day in the US, so just, 15 months ago. Personally, I think the idea that fake news on Facebook influenced the election in any way is a pretty crazy idea. Now, today, we know without a shadow of a doubt that there was Russian influence coming in many different ways, and other influence coming many different ways across Facebook with a lot of, very specific kind of targeting. Again, I would encourage you to read, if you haven't, of course, you must have, this is about news, the news over the weekend with new revelations about Cambridge Analytica. So, life comes at you pretty fast here. What we've learned in the last year is the notion of dark social. It's amazing how, until recently, people didn't really understand this concept. And I'm sure everybody in the room understands it, but I'll just say, dark social has these kind of very sinister overtones. Of course, dark social just means anything that that is not available, publicly available for anybody to see. So if you have any privacy settings on your Facebook account, which I certainly hope you do, even if you share a baby picture, if it's not public, that's dark social. It just means that, researchers and others can't see it. But it also has a lot to do with targeted messages. Now, brands, I work with brands all over the world, and targeting is a fantastic boon to both advertisers and also to consumers who can see, who can be directed towards ads for things they might be interested in case sort of this scattershot approach. But it can also be used for political campaigns who want to very quietly and carefully target political messages at very, very specific groups. I would encourage you to read up on Jonathan Albright. He's a researcher at Columbia University who did some incredible research about just the scale of the Russian propaganda campaigns and how many people that reached in the United States. The reason it wasn't reported, the reason why a lot of the media didn't really notice this was happening was because they're looking at their own Facebook feeds, and those messages weren't targeted at them. And when the people who those messages were targeted at, when they were shared, again, didn't reach the Facebook feeds of a lot of journalists, so it was invisible. Again, dark social. But it's not just dark social. There is, a lot of other issues that the platforms are working through. There's content manipulation, but there's also the notion of fake accounts. On Facebook, it requires, as you know, real information. However, this is the cover story of a New York Times magazine piece a few weeks ago. As many as 40 million accounts on Facebook have been faked. It's, stolen identities, pictures of real people. On Twitter, where it's easier to set up accounts, and Twitter accounts can be anonymous, often for very good reasons for people, particularly for journalists and for dissidents who want to share information. They need that anonymity. However, the flip side to that is it's very easy to set up fake accounts, and not always for nefarious purposes. Sometimes there are, what the story revealed was, just the extent of the companies that sell fake followers, a lot of times for vanity. If you're a celebrity or you're an influencer, that you can buy hundreds and thousands of fake accounts. Not only that, but you can not only buy followers, but you can also pay, and it's really pennies per hundred. You can pay to have those fake followers share and like your post, so that, again, the vanity metrics at the bottom of a Twitter post that show you, how many times this has been shared is of great appeal. And, so I would, again, encourage you to make sure that in your own operations, whether you're in a newsroom or whether you're working with brands or whomever, not to use those kind of metrics, followers, shares, engagements, at face value as your only metric. They are a metric. They are not the metric. So, in the meantime, Twitter, Facebook, all of the platforms are scrambling. Of course, this is not good for them. They understand it's not only good for the world, it's not good for their businesses. They are working towards fixing them, but we're still, in the middle of the story. For Facebook, interestingly enough, the news business, frankly, may just not be worth it to them. Can't really blame them. It's sort of nothing but trouble, and for a whole variety of reasons. And as you can see, this is from a blog post in January. Mark Zuckerberg said, you know what? Our research shows that we use social media to connect with people we care about. It can be good for our well-being. On the other hand, passive reading of articles and videos, even if they're informative, may not be as good. So, this was based on real data that they did about people's mental health. But again, the message here is reading news articles, again, the way that information has been disseminated since Gutenberg is not so good for your health. We're gonna downgrade it in our algorithmic ranking. His executives followed up with that. Adam Mosseri, head of the news feed, we're going to show less public content, including videos and other posts for publishers or businesses. Very, very explicitly, publishers, we're giving you a heads up. We're going to show less of your content. Campbell Brown, head of news partnerships, on stage at the Recode concert. If anyone, and when anyone she meant in speaking to news publishers, if anyone feels that this, meaning Facebook, isn't the right platform for them, then they should not be on Facebook. So again, very clearly, they're not walking away from news, let it be said. They still have a digital news initiative. They are funding journalistic efforts, media literacy efforts, but clearly this is a very public statement saying news is not going to be our priority. You're going to see less of it. So this has had a huge impact on publishers. They've already seen their referrals from Facebook go down. So who will fill the void for publishers? Well, these are a few that might. Flipboard, interestingly enough, never, in recent years, not been talked about that much. But for many publishers, a lot of referrals there. They have 100 million monthly active users. Apple News, 70 million users. The last time the company shared those stats, it's a pretty good number. It's far below the 1.3 billion active iOS device users, but publishers has been very happy with Apple News. Twitter, again, Twitter has had some challenges, but it is in recent days been delivering for many publishers more referral traffic. I think that they see it as an opportunity. News as an opportunity as Facebook is stepping back. They are opening up. They have, if you saw, they've opened up to the public saying we want to, they've put out an RFP saying, help us understand what healthy communities looks like on Twitter for news. So moving in that direction. Snapchat has a lot of news. They pride themselves on being sort of a very safe space for news where you can't get fake news. Well, that is because they are, a closed garden. There is no referral traffic per se. You're on Snapchat, you experience on Snapchat, sort of, the model that Jonah Peretti was talking about. And who have we left off? WhatsApp as well, although WhatsApp has had its own fake news issues as well. So you noticed I haven't talked about Google. So, and I've titled the slide From Testy to Bestie, which was that Google, interestingly enough, not very many years ago, I'm sure the publishers in the room remember, was, for many people, not exactly the darling of the news industry. Well before Facebook, really took off and Twitter had just begun, the concern was that Google News, because of the, snippets from news articles that were available, was replacing the need to click through from Google News to publishers' websites. And there was a lot of, drama around Google being sort of the enemy of the news industry. That, I would say, has changed considerably for a couple of reasons. One, as Facebook took off, that became a bigger challenge, so Google became less of a focus. And also Google has, I have to say to their credit, has made a lot of effort in recent years to create experiences for publishers, including for publishers that have subscriptions, and found other ways through AMP accelerated mobile pages, as you're probably aware, to make it a better experience. And as you can see, this is Chartbeat 2007, very recent data through the end of February 2018. Google search referral, as Facebook search referral is going down, Google search referral is going up. So, Google has become more favorable there. Today, actually, is the 20th, right? Today, March 20th, they're announcing a whole other slew of initiatives around news. We'll see a little bit later this morning on the East Coast of the US. We'll see what that looks like. So for publishers, are beginning to take back control. So, it is sort of, there's been an awakening, more slowly for some, all at once recently for everybody, that in order to succeed, for publishers to succeed, they cannot, as Jonah Peretti's journey, his 180-degree switch indicates, you cannot rely on Facebook or any platform to control your destiny. And the notion that scale is everything has been replaced, the notion of scale has been replaced by the notion of relationships. So it's not necessary for every publisher to reach every single person in the world. It's much more important to have very, very deep relationships with a core audience who's going to become loyal to you, who is going to read you religiously, and who, depending on your business model, is also going to pay you. The three things that are necessary in order for publishers as a category, for publishers to be able to both enlist loyal readers, users, viewers, listeners, depending on your platform, and keep them are what Andreas was talking about: deep quality original content. Not necessarily content about everything in the world. We see quite a bit of success with niche publishers who are focusing on specific areas. They're not trying to boil the ocean, as they say. Certain publishers like the New York Times or the Guardian or the Wall Street Journal are quite broad, but for most, either niche, targeted vertical content or very, very, very hyper-local content, but original content, not aggregation. Those aggregators are suffering. Number two, a real expertise on audience acquisition and retention. This is a science. It requires deep, we heard the AI presentation earlier, it requires deep knowledge about understanding audience acquisition and retention and using the data that you already have, and I'm going to show in a minute, that's why this slide is blank, some of the ways that people are doing it, in order to successfully keep subscribers. Where you see the New York Times have such great success, or the Guardian have such great success acquiring users, in the case of subscribers for the New York Times, for members and supporters at the Guardian, it is a combination of rigorous data collection, rigorous data analytics, and testing to make sure that they define the right methodology that works. And the third is personalization. Now, personalization is going to mean different things to different people, but creating that custom experience is going to become more and more important. So how are publishers doing it? What are the tactics? Again, this is a subscription model from the New York Times. The pricing, the kinds of offers that you see, very much driven by learning about what works, what doesn't work. You may see different ads depending on who you are. You may see different kinds of messages depending on who you are. Newsletters. It's so funny, it's still funny to me that email, which is such sort of an old-fashioned platform, I can't even get my kids to respond to me on email, is such a powerful driver of user data, audience data. To sign up for a newsletter, you have to provide your email. And also retention, habit, and referrals. People read the newsletter, they look forward to it, they click through to the articles. You can get advertising revenue both by sponsors on your newsletter, as well as driving advertising revenue when those loyal readers go and they stay longer on your site. Push alerts. Push alerts. When you give somebody permission for a push alert, That is a very precious real estate. For something to show up on your lock screen, you're not giving that to everyone. If you can gain loyalty through a push alert, get someone to sign up for a push alert, you are on your way. These are all part of the loyalty ladder. Podcasts, again, something of an old-fashioned kind of platform, very popular going back, a million years ago. It may as well have been a million years ago. It was, 15 years ago. But again, podcasts, getting someone to sign up for something. With each of these signups, you're collecting more data, you're learning more about your user, you're able to personalize the experience, and you're creating, and this is really important, ritual. Ritual is going to be key for publishers to engage their loyal audiences. The ritual of waking up and reading the newsletter, the ritual of listening to the podcast on your way to work. And there's a very interesting example of ritual that is happening not in the news space, but there's another example of ritual familiar to those of you in television, which is appointment viewing. So appointment viewing means everybody tune in at 8 o'clock to watch the show. On television, pretty much other than sports or the Oscars, it's dead. People watch things on demand. But interestingly enough, appointment viewing is resurging or possibly resurging on mobile devices. How many people are familiar with HQ Trivia? I don't think it's very big over here. It is taken off like wildfire in the United States. It's not news. It's silly. It's a trivia game. It's fun. It's addictive. It is a trivia game. But here's the thing about HQ Trivia. It is rigidly fixed at 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the US. You must tune in at that time to play, and you can win a few bucks. I mean, it's not, people love to win, but you get like 13 cents depending on how big the pot is divided up. But you must turn in at 3 and 9 or you're not part of the fun. And there's a counter at the top of the screen. And I've been watching over the last few months that counter go up. 200, 300, 500, a million, 1.2 million, almost $2 million people, concurrent viewers at that time playing the game. It is a shared experience. I think there's really interesting lessons in this notion of appointment viewing and, again, ritual. What do you use Facebook? What do you use the platforms for? Lead gen. Where do you build your experiences? On your owned and operated experiences. So as we're winding towards conclusion, the question is it too late? Is it too late to get the genie back in the bottle? This is an eye chart, I realize, but this is from Columbia University Tao Center Journalism School. The y-axis are publishers. It's everything. It's U.S. publishers, but it's everything from BuzzFeed to Vox to the New York Times to Fox News. And then across the x-axis, those are every publisher. The green dots represent where those publishers are represented on what platforms. We, the publishers, have trained in many ways our audiences to be able to find us wherever they are. Are we really going to cut that off? Are we going to disappoint our readers, our viewers, our listeners? This is very tough to take back. And the audiences have been trained. This is from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. 51% of people across 26 countries say platforms are a dominant source of news. Even more frightening, again from Reuters, while 2/3 of respondents could recall that they saw a piece of news on what platform, 2/3 could say, yeah, I saw it on Facebook, Twitter, what have you. Less than half could tell you the source of that news. So yeah, I saw it on Facebook. Okay, who's it from? Who's it from? Is it Axel Springer? Is it the New York Times? Is it The Guardian? Is it the BBC? Or is it, I am a liar.com? They don't know. Because of the great flattening effect of these platforms, you can't recall. It all looks the same. So, this is what we're up against. But again, it's very interesting. This is happening in real time to watch publishers sort of wrest back that loyalty, that kind of deep user experience from platforms to try to have that direct relationship. So in the meantime, I'll just leave you with this last piece of advice. This is data also from Reuters. Grab every opportunity to engage the audience. 46% of people use smartphones for news in bed. 32% access news via smartphone in the bathroom. 42% via smartphones on public transportation. And by the way, I believe that this is what people reported. I think these numbers, I think you could easily double these numbers and they would be true. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Take a question?
Sure, yeah.
Vivien, thanks for that. As always, we're going to break for coffee in just a moment, but if you have a question, raise your hand. Now, as you might expect, I clearly have one, and I'm going to push you a little bit because the Facebook issue is a really interesting one. You know, as you pointed out, it was so dominant for so long, and we all surrendered. We all basically sort of put our hands up and said, okay, you own the media, we'll just, whatever you say, we'll do it. But you referred to the fact that there are a few problems, their model perhaps is not as strong as it used to be. If I were to ask you to sort of look forward 5 years, 10 years, how do you think this all plays out? Does Facebook become another player in a much bigger universe, or does it keep that dominance?
Well, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Facebook is huge, right? What are we up to now? 2.2 billion monthly active users. I mean, I've seen a lot, especially the last few days, sort of a lot of noise, people on Twitter going, this is the end of Facebook. I don't believe that for a second. And by the way, I am by no stretch of the imagination would suggest anybody give up on Facebook. The point is, it is critical for lead generation, if nothing else. I mean, if you want to capture a large amount of people, you must be on Facebook. And look, the people that run Facebook are smart. They will, I mean, there have been some stumbles. They will figure out a way to come back from this. I have, you know, from these troubles, I have no doubt. Will it become as dominant a news platform? I'm not so sure. So I think the answer to your question is, it will continue to be a very, very important platform for news, but one of many.
Yeah, makes sense. If there are any more questions, make yourself known now. And if not, can I ask you please to thank Vivien? Thank you very much.
Thank you.